Yeah, well, see, that's what I thought. Adjacent to this house. For public comment, I was curious because I was thinking. Yeah. Oh, now that's okay. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're just going to do that. I don't. Somewhere
I have two things to make.
yeah. Is
Okay, so if you don't, I can. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, if we set that precedent.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's good. I can hear you good. Okay. Where's our city? Where's our city clerk?
That would be 7 o'clock.
Okay, God has spoken. Yes, we're not started yet. Let's get going. Okay, then let's call this to order. This is the City Council, City of Ellensburg City Council meeting for the evening Monday, December 6, 2021. Start with Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Wilkins.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The clerk will call the roll.
Elliott? Goodlow? Lamb,
I'm here, kind of.
Preferred acceptable form.
Lowquist,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
Morgan,
Councilmember Morgan is requesting an excused absence.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and second for an excused absence for Councilmember Morgan. All those in favor?
Aye.
I do vote aye, that motion carries. Thank you.
Mayor Tab.
I'm here. Thanks. Just with our new camera, can I show people that? Does anybody need upper body exercise for this evening? I think we've got over 400 and some pages in the packet. We don't believe that's a reflection of our new city manager, but I would note that at the time that I have been here, I have never seen a 429
I
page
have not seen it.
council packet.
And I hear you cut some things.
And yes, actually we did. Okay, with that, let's move on. We do have a proclamation this evening. It's an Environmental Rights Awareness Day 2021. Would anyone care to read?
I'll read, because I want to substitute what was on the diet.
Yeah, so I just want to note, there's a published proclamation in our packet. If you're looking through that, there is a slightly modified version of that on the dais. I don't believe that it changes actually the intent of the proclamation. So with that, just a note, and then we'll do it.
So Environmental Rights Awareness Day 2021. Whereas Ellensburg is an engaged, proactive community whose residents are committed to a livable world. And whereas December 10th is the date of the international community and cities around the United States observed Human Rights Day, commemorating the day in 1948 that the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And whereas more than 150 countries have enshrined environmental protection or a right to a healthy environment in their constitutions. And on October 8, 2021, the United Nations Human Rights Council recognized that having a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is a human right. And whereas environmental health and safety affect the health of people in our community, their access to healthy and nutritious food, and their quality of life in many ways, including their standard of living. And whereas building awareness of environmental rights is part of educating ourselves about human rights and ensuring that we can enjoy those rights. And whereas recognizing an Environmental Rights Awareness Day is appropriate for our community as we continue engaging together in positive and productive discussions and movement towards a sustainable future of locally relevant solutions. And whereas the city acknowledges the importance of a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as critical to the enjoyment of all human rights. And whereas local organizations such as Our Environment, Rodeo City Repair Cafe, Ellensburg Glass Recycling Co-op, Kittitas Audubon Society, and the League of Women Voters are working to support environmental rights. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Ellensburg proclaims December 10th, 2021 as Environmental Rights Day in Ellensburg and encourages the residents of our community to continue engaging in positive and productive discussions toward a sustainable future of locally relevant solutions. Signed the 6th day of December, 2021.
Mr. Mayor, I move mayor's signature on the Environmental Rights Awareness Day proclamation. Second.
We have a motion second for the mayor's signature on the Environmental Rights Awareness Day 2021 proclamation. All those in favor?
Aye.
I too vote aye, that motion carries. Thank you. That then moves us, I don't see any awards recognition. I think we're good.
Mr. Mayor, move approval of the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I do vote aye, but moves us to consent.
Mayor, move consent agenda.
Second.
We have motion and second to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
I too vote aye, that motion carries. That brings us then to page 115 in our packets. This is Board and Commissions applications and requests for reappointment. So we do have a couple new applicants. Process-wise, how do we want to do this? I know that we have two applications for vacancies for new individuals for the Affordable Housing Commission and one person is withdrawn. And then we have the reappointments, request for reappointments.
Who withdrew?
Margaret Miller.
Or just affordable housing or for all of them?
So we can start with that. Then we do have, we did accept a resignation this evening for the Affordable Housing Commission for Dolores Gonzalez. And then that would make one vacancy. We have one reappointment. And then we do have one new applicant. And I believe Jordan Rule is online. So if we could, Jordan, if we could get you live, unmuted, and the video. It's really just an opportunity to introduce yourself to council. Have an opportunity to actually ask us questions if you have questions about what we're doing with the affordable housing, and also for council to ask you any questions. We typically would not appoint this evening, but would wait until the subsequent meeting for any decision on the appointment. But with that, if you would just maybe a brief introduction, what appeals to you in working with the Affordable Housing Commission, and then we'll go from there.
Hi, I'm Jordan Ruley. It was kind of hard to hear what you're saying. Sorry about that. I'm on my home laptop. But yeah, I'm excited to join the Affordable Housing Commission. I think it's a good thing for our community. Just kind of fill the void in some of our housing needs. So
Jordan, if you would, could you give us just a bit of background on your experience and your interest in serving on the commission?
So I'm a loan officer, so I work at Academy Mortgage. So I'm familiar with housing and the real estate market. So I don't have much experience with the affordable housing. I do have a certification with the Washington Housing Finance Commission, and I'd be interested to help start some down payment assistance programs in our community. I think that might be helpful if that's something that we could accomplish.
Great, thank you. Council, do you have any questions? Seeing none, thanks, Jordan. I would just note that Margaret Miller Parrott again has withdrawn her application for the commission, which was her first choice. And we do have the one vacancy. So Jordan will take your input and your application into consideration and take action at our next council meeting, which would be the 20th.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. We also have another applicant, Raven Harlan, for the Environmental Commission. I think Raven is here this evening. So if you would just kind of your name, address, and yeah, up to the front. Just again, an opportunity to introduce yourself to council. why that particular commission appeals to you?
My name and my address?
Sure.
Okay, Raven Harlan, 602 North Venus Street. I have been the Iowa Cemetery Secretary for 5.5 years. I was going to CW for geography and I wanted to specialize in water years 2012 to 2015. I did not finish, but I have traveled the world in my younger years. I grew up in Hawaii for 15 years, where I started recycling at a very young age with my dad in a white van, separating bottles of glass by green, brown, and clear at the bars in Waikiki, and crushing cans for money when I was a kid. My dad's name is Richard Gallagher. He's the director of the cemetery. I work closely with Howard Lyman, who was the head of our environment. I work closely with Rodeo City Repair Cafe, the Ellensburg glass recycling company, and I'm starting to work for the Poyo. And I garden very well, and I have about 20 varieties of seeds to sell and just give away. And I'm getting better and better each year. So I have a lot of interest in the environment, and I'm interested in learning more. A little nervous.
Questions?
So there was 2 resignations, so there are 2 vacancies for the environmental commission now? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so for the new applicants, again, we'll take those under consideration at our next council meeting. We do have a number of requests for reappointment. I could just quickly go through those, and then would request a motion from council for reappointment to those boards and commissions. Actually, I'll hold out on the EBDA because that's their recommendation. But we have Sarah Bedsall requesting reappointment to the Affordable Housing Commission, Christina Woolman requesting reappointment to the Environmental Commission, and Monica Miller requesting appointment to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee.
Motion to reappoint the 3 individuals.
Second.
A motion second to reappoint the 3 individuals who have applied for reappointment to the respective commissions. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I too vote aye, that motion carries. That brings us to a recommendation from the Ellensburg Business Development Authority to reappoint John Perry and Garrett Pashusta to the EBDA board.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion second to accept the recommendation from the EBDA to reappoint John Perry and Garrett Pashusta to the EBDA board. Is there any further discussion?
I just want to commend John Perry for keeping at it. I served with him on council 20 years ago, and he was a commissioner before that.
Well, and he was, he's also on a bit of a housing.
He's amazing.
And remembers all that stuff, which is even
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
He can be quite a historian and help us with that institutional knowledge. So thanks. Did I close that?
We need to vote.
Yeah, okay, so we do have a motion second for the reappointment to the EBDA. All those in favor?
I
I too vote aye, that motion carries.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah,
just to be sure, we're not, I don't think we're getting Councilmember Lamb to vote. Through the sheets.
They're going really fast, so I figured I'd yell if I object.
If you can, Councilmember, try and interject.
yeah.
All right, all right,
The operative word was try.
got it.
Yeah. Okay, that brings us to citizen comment on non-agenda. This is an opportunity for individuals from the public to comment on items which are concerned for this or matter over which council has control. When recognized, approach the podium, provide your name, address, whether you're representing yourself or others. Your comments will be limited to 3 minutes. If you do have written comments, please submit them to the city clerk. Comments of a personal and pertinent derogatory nature will not be tolerated. We'll start with folks that are in the room. If there are people who wish to provide non-agenda comment virtually, please raise your hand. And you'll be recognized after we've gone through that. First individual that I have signed up is Lee Bates. And while Lee's coming forward, I've got Jackie, I can't read your last name. Brunson, but it indicates for the comprehensive plan, which is the public hearing after this. So is that, you want to make sure that you're, okay. Good. Okay, Mr. Bates.
I'm Lee Bates, and my address is 1802 North Bluegrass Lane. I'd like to start first by just publicly thanking Ranger Kevin Davis of the Washington State Parks and Rec Department, who has really helped make the juncture at Cora Street, where the trail crosses Cora, safer by having brush cleared, adding some signage. I know that the State Parks and Rec Department are still planning to do more to make it safer, but I would like to just direct your attention to something I'm sure you've seen, the Fair and Piers traffic flow report. To be honest with you, I don't think it sheds a real good light on safety at Cora, and I know it's been a problem and many people have addressed it recently, but I'd like to read part of it in the time I have remaining. This is a narrative. By 3:09 p.m., the queue extended past Bluegrass Lane as seen in figure 5, while vehicles did not block Bluegrass Lane during our field observations. Residents have reported that this roadway is blocked by drivers on some days. Also at 3:09 p.m., the white pickup, there's an ever famous white pickup, I wish the police would find the person, that previously followed the school bus turned around and parked on the west side of Cora Street. Having vehicles parked on both sides of the street bottlenecks Cora, preventing two-way traffic. This condition occurred on Cora Street north of the trail crossing, see figure 6. At this time, school buses and other traffic traveling on Cora Street were required to navigate a narrow space between parked vehicles on either side of the road. Additionally, vehicles, excuse me, were partially blocking the marked crosswalk. For a handicapped person, it doesn't make said person real happy. And reports indicate that drivers completely blocked the crosswalk some days. These are safety concerns, bullet 1. There are several of them. I'll just read a few. Queues routinely, partially, or fully block the trail crosswalk and the crosswalk across Cora at Bluegrass Lane. This presents a safety challenge for people walking and rolling. I said walking and rolling. Must be a technical term. It's not rock and roll, but walking and rolling. So I guess that means a stroller. I don't know. As well as potential concerns about limiting access that complies with the Americans with Disability Act. And as you know, likely I have filed a complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice over that. I do appreciate someone from the city calling me about it, though. I never get time to finish.
Thank you. I thought, so do we have, is there anyone else in chambers who would wish to approach council on a non-agenda?
Thank you. Pat Kelleher, 6530 Wilson Creek Lane in Ellensburg. Just another week, another council meeting to remind you, you still got a queuing concern on Cora, a safety concern, a well-documented concern, a concern that shouldn't exist. $3 million of mitigation was obviated. Traffic report submitted by scientists and engineers that said this would work. It doesn't work. You're back 55 cars. Nobody's contacted me and said, hey, we got this under control. We're going to do something about it. It was in your occupancy statement that no queuing on Cora would be allowed. We might concern that as a safety, immediate safety concern. Nothing's happened. Probably be back in 2 weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to approach council over a non-agenda item? Sorry, wrong button. Does anyone who is attending virtually wish to speak to a non-agenda item? I'm showing Christopher Hobbs. Okay, you should be unmuted.
Hello.
Yep, you're good.
Okay, good evening, City Council. Christopher Hobbs, 1391 Reeser Creek Road. I'd like to express my concern about access to the meetings. I understand that the governor has stated we're under an emergency, and that's the reason for all of this, but I'm having a very difficult time hearing most everything that's going on. All the voices are muffled, undoubtedly because of the masks. And also there's a concern of access to the meetings and compliance with Open Public Meetings Act, because I believe that there's people like myself who are not able to wear masks, that are reduced to only communicating virtually. And like Jason Ruley previously also commented that he was having difficulty hearing. And there's also people that don't have this technology, that don't have the computer or smartphone capability to log into these meetings. So this is a concern. There are people that are being disenfranchised from having access to city council. And as I've stated in previous testimony to the council, that in person is always better. So I certainly hope that the city council will continuously ascertain the importance or the local need of whether we still need to remain masked up like this. I'm leery of the governor's continual one-size-fits-all solution to these problems, and I would hope that the city council would start to think a little more locally and address some of the problems of people having access to this meeting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else attending virtually like to address council on a non-agenda item? Seeing no one, we'll move on. So this will bring us then to 8A. This is page 130 in your packet. It's a public hearing, first reading of an ordinance amending the Ellensburg Comprehensive Plan. Am I starting with reading the public hearing? Okay. Got a little confused with some of the side conversations. So let's do this. The purpose of this legislative hearing is for city council to consider first reading of an ordinance to amend the city's comprehensive plan. The public hearing is now open. Ask your cooperation in the following procedure. Everyone will be given an opportunity to be heard. The city clerk will be making a recording of the proceedings. I will first recognize requests to testify from anyone attending this hearing in person, followed by any persons attending remotely via Zoom. If you wish to participate virtually via Zoom, you must raise your virtual hand in the Zoom meeting screen or press *9 if you're connected by telephone only. Wait until you've been recognized and you have been unmuted. When you are invited to speak, begin by stating your name and address and indicate whether you're speaking for yourself individually, as a spokesperson for a certain group, or both. Speak slowly and clearly. Only one person will be allowed to speak at a time. Any questions of staff are to be directed through the council. Before we do hear from the audience, is there a staff report to be presented?
There is a staff report. And good evening, Mayor, City Council. And just to kind of give everyone a heads up, this will be a lengthy report. But it's an important one, and we need to go through all the items, but I will do my best to summarize. And then, of course, you guys can ask questions. But this is our annual comprehensive plan amendment process. This year, we received 11 proposed amendments to the comp plan that were submitted during the annual docketing process. The submitted forms are in your packets as exhibits 1 through 8. And it indicates who submitted the proposal, the rationale provided by the applicant for the proposed amendment. And then also included are the exhibits that depict the actual text and map amendments, and those are exhibits 9 through 16. I've also noted that several additional supporting documents have been attached to the report. They're labeled exhibits 1 through 23. And I just wanted to advise you that the ordinance itself refers to exhibit A and B. And when it comes back to you for second reading, that's how they will be labeled. But I thought the 1 through 23 would help you navigate through the report a little bit better for this first reading. So under the requirements of the GMA, we're allowed to amend the comp plan 1 time per year. And we have a very formal process outlined in our code where any member of the community, city council member, or city board or commission or staff can submit proposals. And all of the docket amendment proposals need to be considered by council concurrently in order to ascertain the cumulative effects of the various proposals. So at the July 19th, 2021 meeting, City Council approved a motion to docket 8 of the 11 submitted comp plan amendments. Now, the process for this is outlined in Chapter 15-250-090 of the Ellensburg City Code. Several of the attached exhibits just demonstrate that we met all the requirements. We did put notice in the daily record. That's Exhibit 17 found on page 254. It was also advertised on the news page of the city website when we took it to the Planning Commission, November 18th, 2021. That was also advertised in the daily record on November 4th, and that's found on page 256. This meeting tonight, that was advertised on November 20th. That's Exhibit 23 found on page 265. This also went through the SEPA review, and following the 14-day pre-threshold determination comment period, a preliminary determination of non-significance was issued on November 3rd, 2021. That's Exhibit 19 found on page 258. And then one thing, I apologize, I failed to include, I'm going to need to enter a new exhibit into the record, is that we actually did issue the final SEPA determination. Make sure it's showing up on the Zoom screen. So want to enter this into the record as Exhibit 24. And this was issued, as I stated, was on November 26th, 2021. I apologize for failure to include that. If anyone wants a hard copy later, let me know. Regarding the requirement to send this off to the Department of Commerce, we did do that on October 19th. That's page 261 in your packet. And we did receive acknowledgement from them, which is Exhibit 22. And the 60-day review period will be complete no later than December 18th, which will be before your second reading. So as indicated, there were 8 proposals docketed by council. And at this point, rather than start with docket 2101, I'm actually going to go and take you to page 135 of the packet. We're going to talk about item 2110 because we might need to, we need to discuss procedural requirements at this point. I'm going to explain the docket proposal. There's a proposed amendment since it went to the Planning Commission, and then I'm going to turn some time over to Terry, the city attorney. But what I would like to do is share the process of what has happened with this proposal. So the proposal that we're looking at is the Koocham property proposal. And when this came to you for docketing, it's this parcel. It's off Dry Creek Road, Reeser Creek Road, and we've highlighted it. So when it came for docketing, it was an entire larger parcel, I believe it right here, and they're proposing to do a boundary line adjustment. Since docketing, it is now this shape. But let me explain a little bit right here. So when this property was annexed into the city, February or March of 2020, we assigned residential suburban zoning. And the property owner indicated at the time that this is not the zoning that he wanted. It used to be zoned industrial in the county. Council advised him to work with staff. So when we worked together, he decided that he thought it would be more appropriate to have zoning that matched the other properties that he owns on University Way. But let me go show you another map. This is the zoning map. What you saw before was the future land use map. with this zoning map, he owns property off of University Way. This pink is commercial highway. And the green is residential suburban. And he felt it would be more appropriate to have it match that, the commercial highway. In order to give him a future zoning of commercial highway, the future land use map itself needs to be general commercial and services, which is what it states right here. So when we did the docketing, we moved forward with the request for general commercial and services. It went through SEPA that way, and then it went to the Planning Commission. Now, when the Planning Commission got it, they thought it would be nice to have some commercial type services on this property, knowing that there's a lot of residential homes that are planned for development over here that have access to some types of services, but they didn't want it to be too high scaled. They wanted a little bit more limited commercial. And so what they recommended was that the future land use designation be not general commercial and services, but neighborhood commercial, or another use that allowed for mixed uses. After the Planning Commission hearing, I spoke with the owner, and he said that what he really wanted all along was to be able to divide the property. And I have another map. Make it a little bit larger. There's a natural division on this property with the river. I included that on the map. And what he would prefer, if you can see these buildings under here, there's some farming operations going on. He'd like to actually just leave that alone. And then there's also topography change where the elevation drops quite a bit right here, and have just this portion of the property be reassigned to general commercial and services, so that in the future, that parcel or that piece of the property could be rezoned to match what is next to it. So that is not something that the Planning Commission reviewed. And so I actually want to let Terry speak to this just a little bit, and we'll come back to me.
Thanks, Kirsten. That's a good explanation of what's occurred so far. So what you had was at docketing, the entire parcel was approved for docketing for general commercial and services. Went through SEPA and Planning Commission that way. But now what the applicant would prefer is to kind of shrink that designation to just the southern half of what was originally docketed, which was general commercial and services, and leave the northern half, as Kirsten stated, what it is now. So I've looked at this from the legal requirements under the GMA and SEPA, and I don't think that the proposed modification would need to go back necessarily, if council wants to move forward with that, to the Planning Commission for review. But it could be sent back to them. That's one of the options under the code you have. You have choices what to do with docketing. One would be to just approve it as proposed for modification by the applicant. If you do that, it can go, you can read all of the, consider all of the proposals tonight for first reading. If instead you want to send it back to the Planning Commission for consideration, I would suggest that you go through the reading for the rest, go through the consideration of the rest of them tonight, but continue the hearing until it comes back from the Planning Commission with a recommendation. The reason for that is under the GMA, all docketed proposals have to be considered together. You can't separate them out. So, but that is an option. And the third option would be obviously is you can stick with the Planning Commission's recommendation, and that's as it appears in the agenda report. So those are sort of the three options. My recommendation at this point is to move forward and have the rest of the discussion about the other proposals. Once the public hearing is closed, then you can have the discussion about what you wish to do with this particular docketed item, and make a decision based on that. If the decision is to move forward with the proposal as modified or proposed for modification, then we would, for second reading of the ordinance, bring back a version which has this particular proposal in it. But I think you can still proceed with first reading tonight if that's your choice. So there may be questions about what I've just gone through, but I would suggest you wait until the public hearing portion is closed and is in council member discussion. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Okay, so what we'll do now is we will actually go back to the regular order and we'll go to docket proposal 2101. This is described on page 132 of your packets. This docketing request comes before you every year. It's a proposal to do the annual update to the 6-year capital improvement plans. And the proposals come from the Community Development Department, Parks and Rec, Public Works, and what you have before you is various elements that were gathered from other plans adopted by the city. And I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, but goodness, get to it. There we go. I'm not going to read these for you, but this is just the exhibit, and you'll find that on page 172 of your packet. So we're going to scroll through that till we get to the next exhibit. Docket proposal 2102. This docketing request is exhibit 2 found on page 140. This was submitted by the Community Development Department. As stated in the docketing request, this is a continuation of docket items 2002 and 2003 from last year. They were completed only in part. These previous docket items requested that new language be added to the comprehensive plan, focusing on the city's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And at the conclusion of the 2020 adoption, the amendments we ended up with included new language in the introduction section of the comp plan with the addition of a new value statement. And then during the council meeting of January 4th, City Council referred the remainder of both docket items to the 2021 docket cycle. Here we are. Took a while. A little speak while I did that. So the remaining portion of the docket items was to develop a new chapter for the comprehensive plan, chapter 9, which focuses on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Ellensburg community. This is page 1 of this new chapter that's written. Begins with an overview and what you'll find in it. Following the January 19th, 2021 adoption of the amended comp plan, City Council also proceeded with the formation of the new Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission. They held their first meeting on May 11th, 2021. It's chaired by Nancy Goodlow, who's done a fabulous job with them. And they immediately began work on developing this new chapter. There was heavy staff involvement. Nancy and all of her commission members worked quite hard on pulling this information together. They also pulled information from the listening sessions that did start occurring in 2020 that led to the DEI report, or IDE, whatever it was called back then. And it was also utilized to help frame portions of this chapter. Now, when we're looking at text amendments to the comp plan, anything that's new is underlined. If you're going to eliminate text, it's a strike through. So this entire chapter is underlined for tonight. When it comes back in second reading, there will not be any underlining. Just going to scroll through and just hit, the topics, and I'm not going to read any of it. I'm assuming everyone did that in advance. So we have the background and context. I'm just explaining what diversity, equity, and inclusion mean, in addition to fostering a sense of belonging. Just talking about our past and looking to the future. And we have some data that we pulled from the housing needs assessment that was completed in June of this year. And then we get down to the goals, policies, and programs. And so they actually spent quite a bit of time pulling these together. And like I said, I'm not going to read through them, talk through them at all, but it's an entire chapter that would take all night. So I'm going to move on to the next proposal. Okay. So the next docket proposal is 2103. The actual request itself is Exhibit 3 found on page 142. And it's a proposal to update the housing chapter to conform with the requirements of House Bill 1220 relating to emergency shelters and housing through local planning and development regulations. And instead of reading what's in the report, I'm going to just take you down to the edits. So it begins on page 189, but the edits, oh goodness, they're not till page 202. I'm sure people watching online are not enjoying the scrolling, but we'll get there. So there's no changes to the text of the chapter itself, and I'll talk about that on the next docket item. Any of the changes are found in the goals and policy section. And so, like I said, it begins on page 202. Okay. So let me go back up to the goal, H2. We're just simply adding the word accommodate, allow and encourage and accommodate a variety of housing types and densities to meet housing needs of all economic segments of the community. And then what we've done is added a new program 4 under policy D. Policy D reads to create and preserve ADA accessible and affordable housing opportunities locally and with a regional perspective. So the new program 4 is to create an inventory of surplus properties suitable for affordable housing. A new policy E to identify potential properties to allow for emergency housing, emergency shelters, and permanent supportive housing. And then a new program under that policy to develop a conditional use provision in the permitted use table in the land development code, allowing for emergency housing, shelters, and permanent supportive housing in appropriate zones. If this were to be adopted, this would put us into compliance with that House bill. So those are all the changes there. And then I wanted to move on to docket proposal 2104. That's from exhibit 4, which is found on page 144. As stated on the staff report, so the staff report section I'm going to be looking at right now is page 134. I keep throwing all these numbers out there for you. So this was submitted by the Community Development Department, and the idea had been to update the housing chapter to align with the demographics that we pulled out of the June 2021 housing needs assessment. The proposal would update all the facts, figures, and charts. You guys saw all those as we were reviewing that needs assessment. And it's pretty comprehensive. And as I started looking into this, it became apparent that we needed to do a thorough review of the entire plan because a lot of that data is going to need to be added throughout the entire plan. And the proposal is to start working with the Planning Commission in January to begin making all the correct changes and actually take it to the public for consideration as well. So with that said, there was no actual amendments made. Staff we recommend to council to refer this to the next year. And at the public hearing at the Planning Commission, they made that same recommendation from staff to request that council forward this on into the next year. And then docket proposal 2105 was submitted by the city's IT division. That begins on page, I didn't give you a page for exhibit 5. I don't think you're going to go back to it. It was submitted by the city's IT division, and it's related to the support of the telecom utility. So the proposed amendments would articulate a vision for broadband fiber deployment and guide development of the city's digital roads. Additional programs and action items are proposed within the capital facilities and utilities chapter, and also in the economic development chapter. So the next part of what we're going to look at with all this scrolling going on will be that capital facilities and utilities chapter. So there's just a few changes in here. I told you what specific pages they were based on the page number down here, but we also have the bigger packet pages 204. So it actually begins on 217. So let's, I'm so sorry. Scrolling is going to be fun for folks to watch. Okay, so what we wanted to do is to actually provide a little bit more language that would make us more competitive and eligible for grants related to broadband, and also just simply demonstrate that the city is prepared to provide this particular service to the community members. Okay, I'm getting there. All right, so the first thing I got is under level of service. We have several level of service standards that already exist within the comp plan: fire protection, different utilities, et cetera. IT is proposing we add another service, which is broadband internet, and have a level of service standard, which we've outlined right here. And then on the next page, pretty minor little edit here under adequacy and concurrency is to just add the word telecommunication about having the ability to meet current demands at the service levels. And then the next one is within the goals, policies, and programs section. All right, so under goal CFU4, support the use of data and technology to meet residents' needs and improve efficiency of services. Under policy B, which is to encourage new and cost-effective information and telecommunications technologies that would benefit residents and improve services, they proposed a new program 3 related to leveraging existing telecom assets and utility services to essentially deliver fiber optic to all businesses and residents. And I'm not going to read that entire language, but that is found within there. And then we also have in the action items, they proposed this, but I sat down with the IT department. We talked through all this recently. But to update the telecommunications utility system plan and ensure that the functional plan is regularly updated to identify facility inventories, potential funding sources, and implementation strategies for the telecom utility. Also to reduce barriers and costs to the telecommunications utility infrastructure extension. Information about coordinating with stakeholders, dig once, one touch, make ready. And then also to develop a digital inclusion plan. So this is to convene partners to develop a digital inclusion plan to guide decision-making on the telecommunications infrastructure and measure progress toward digital equity. So those are all the proposed changes to that chapter. Now, the next chapter that we've got edits to is the economic development chapter. And I'm first going to just simply show what the IT department proposed. And I'm going to see if my mouse will cooperate with me here and not go too far. So you don't have to watch me scroll forever. This is goals begins on, it's like page 244. Where are we at? Okay. Possible. All right, and then I want to explain that the DEI Commission also reviewed the proposed changes to the economic development chapter. I didn't really mention that in the staff report, but in addition to the IT proposed changes, there's a few that the DEI Commission proposed. So for instance, here in policy A, this one was proposed by the DEI, encourage growth that will provide goods and services that will meet the diversity of needs of the local and regional community. So wherever that talks about diversifying, that was proposed by the DEI Commission. Now here, program 7 under policy B. So stimulate and diversify Ellensburg's economy is the main goal. The policy that's under is to promote the retention and expansion of existing businesses as well as the development of new businesses. The proposal is to add this program 7. Expand city telecommunications utility infrastructure and service areas to meet business needs for retention, expansion, relocation, and formation. Policy C was modified by the DEI Commission to create a predictable regulatory environment which encourages participation and is accessible to all members of the community. And then from IT again, sorry, let me go back up to the main reminder. It's about stimulating and diversifying Ellensburg's economy. And then under policy D, which is encourage development of light industrial uses within the city of Ellensburg. Program 5 is simply stating to offer city broadband fiber telecommunication utility services to all properties that are zoned light industrial. Here's another addition from the DEI Commission. We have another program here under policy B, but going back up to the main goal. This goal is to emphasize economic development of downtown as an economic, tourist, retail, art, and cultural and event destination. So under policy B, which is to partner with local organizations to implement the downtown economic development plan, so specific to downtown. The proposed program 3 is to offer city broadband fiber telecommunications utility services to all addresses in the downtown core. Okay, so the only other change here was under the policy connections, and this was also proposed by the DEI Commission. Just noting that they can go to the DEI chapter, which includes policies and programs that support a welcoming and inclusive community. Okay, so then moving on to Docket Proposal 2106, that one is just specific to the content of the economic development chapter. We breezed past all of the edits, but this proposal was submitted by Centrifuge, Ellensburg's Business Development Authority, and their proposal was to add language to the chapter that spoke to the economic impacts of COVID-19 and the resiliency of the community, reference the findings of their recent broadband study, update the economic data in the chapter, including economic forecast data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and also reference the relationship to the housing and other markets and the impacts of the economic development in our community. So I were to scroll back up to the top of this chapter, there's a lot of modification. Too far. A lot of modifications to the economic development chapter, and I'm not going to go through them in the same kind of detail because it's pretty much the entire chapter. This is the beginning of the chapter. There's nothing changed in the first page, but there's a little bit of information that's changed in regards to the workforce profile. We did pull some data from the housing needs assessment, info about the employers. Got a lot of data. Also, some of this is from the housing needs assessment. The centrifuge proposed some language, and this was reviewed by the Planning Commission, and they recommended forwarding it. New data on housing income because of the housing needs assessment. A little bit of info and updates to the different economic sectors. Reference to a downtown market study, a little bit of updates to CWU's information, a little bit about tourism. This information was proposed by centrifuge to be added regarding the infrastructure. You can determine whether you want to keep that or not. And then there's a little bit more information about some of the access that we've got to the freeways, the airport, Bowersfield, the industrial park near the airport. And then a little bit more information about the pandemic as they proposed that they wanted included in there. So like I said, there's quite a bit of change. There's some information about trends in here. Some of the information was just moved like elsewhere in the chapter. So that's why it might be struck out, but it's also included elsewhere. Okay, and some of this information actually came from when we did the work with the Council of Governments to figure out our 2017 adoption of the plan. So we left some of that alone. And this is where it really does speak to the business resiliency. So there's a lot to the chapter. I'm not going to speak to it anymore. If you have questions, when we get to that point, we can go into those questions. And then moving on to proposal 21. Well, we've already talked about 2110, so we're actually going to skip right over to 2111. 2110 was the Koocham property one. So with this one, it's so easy to get too far. Okay, I'll find it. I'll talk about it, and then I'll find it. This docketing request was for an update to the future land use designation for property that's located to the south of the city limits. It's in the UGA. It's directly adjacent to the southern boundary of the city limits. There's just one little map. Just want to show it to you. And the proposal is to make it to where the future land use is light industrial. Here we are. The proposal that came before you was to change the entirety of this parcel, and I'm going to, and when you look at the actual docket request on page 169, you'll see that what the request was to change it from general commercial and services to light industrial. And that was submitted by staff, and the property owner was accepting of that. But then we had further conversations after that, and what they've proposed is they would like to just leave this portion of the property as general commercial and services. And they're proposing these boundaries that basically just follow the river, or I'm sorry, creek, it's not a river, and leave that piece alone, and then redesignate these properties to light industrial. And what would happen then, because it's not in the city limits, if they decide to annex, it would immediately be assigned light industrial zoning at time of annexation. But they also are aware they would have to do a short plat to create those actual property lines. It's acceptable to do the split designation for just the future land use, but we don't want to allow a rezone to be like a split zoning on one parcel of land. So this went before the Planning Commission, and they voted in favor 6-1 to move forward with this request. Staff thinks it's perfectly reasonable. Just to give you an idea of where this is Berry Road, this is Canyon Road, the sewer treatment plant's over here, and the Flying J's here, you know, or something right here. And they thought this might be an appropriate area for maybe another truck stop or something of that nature, and just leave it alone as is, and then have this available for light industrial, because we're getting inquiries constantly. Where can we put light industrial? And we're just basically running out of land. So that concludes all of the docket proposals, but now I'm going to just share with you a little bit on the procedural requirements. So they said the planning commission, they already held a public hearing. That was on November 18th. And pursuant to 15-250-090 D6, they could either forward it with approval in the form submitted for public hearing, approve with changes, approve in part, or disapproval. And I'll explain their full recommendations in a moment here, but no written comments were received in advance of the public hearing. No members of the public testified during the public hearing. And at the conclusion of the hearing, the commission voted for approval in part. So more specifically, they recommended approval of, okay. Docket items 2101, 2102, 2103, 2105, and 2106 as presented by staff. And then I explained to you what they had proposed with 2110. They had thought it might be more appropriate as neighborhood commercial for the future land use designation. But then we've explained how the property owners come back with a split designation request. Specific to 2111, I already noted they voted favor 6-1. And docket item 2104, which was the proposal to update the housing chapter. The commission made a recommendation to refer that item into the 2022 calendar year for the reasons we previously discussed in the report. So the next step is for you to review this in your public hearing. So ECC 15-250-090 D8 states that City Council, after recommendation from staff and the Planning Commission, and after holding a public hearing, shall make one of the following decisions. Approval in accordance with the findings and recommendations submitted by the Planning Commission. Approval with modifications. Refer all or part of the plan text or map amendment proposal back to the Planning Commission. Refer all or part of the plan text or map amendment proposal to the following year's annual amendment process, or finally disapprove is another option. And if council's decision is to refer the amendment request back to the commission, the council must specify which matters it wishes reconsidered by the Planning Commission, but the final form and content of all comp plan amendments is determined by the City Council. And so you've received basically the staff recommendation throughout. That concludes my lengthy staff report. I appreciate everyone's patience, and I'll be available for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. I just would note, I don't believe it's lengthy, and I think your observation that this is an important part of our process is valid.
Thank you.
So then the floor is open to testimony from the public. Each person will have an opportunity to address council for an initial period not to exceed 5 minutes. If more time is needed, it will be made available after everyone has had an opportunity to speak. Does anyone wish to approach council on any of the docketed items? Yeah, and I know that we have, so it's Jackie Brunson. Yeah, if you would, name, address, whether you're speaking for yourself or others. And perhaps we could make sure that we know which proposal you're speaking to, which of the docketed items.
Jackie Brunson, 1585 Josem Road, Ellensburg, co-owner of Valley Land Company and owner of the parcel in question. We would like the City Council to know we agree and are in favor of this comp plan proposal pertaining to our parcel. We agree with the proposed map showing the two different zones. The general commercial zone best suits and is compatible with uses of Crossberry Road to the north. And the light industrial zone proposal would provide for development and support services to the industry. We look forward to being a proactive partner to these proposals. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else wish to approach council on any of the docketed items?
There's too much in here.
Koocham, 1404 Dry Creek. I was the applicant here, and I apologize for the confusion. The parcel south of the creek is at the same geographical elevation as the rest of the commercial highway property. The property north of the creek is elevation about maybe 8 to 10 feet higher. The request for changing this to commercial highway makes sense because there's no access to that portion of the property below the creek unless it's tied in and zoned the same as the rest of it. I guess we had some confusion in the presentation, my fault, and I apologize, but I was only asking for this small piece below the creek to be rezoned the same as the property next to it. And it makes sense, I think, also because the property around it, what I own, what I don't own, is also zoned commercial. That's the questions I have.
Great, thank you. Again, just note this is a land use map, not a zone map. Anyone else from the public wish to approach?
Did you need any more clarification on that?
No, I need to close the. Let me check online. I have Christopher Hobbs has his hand raised. I think
Hello.
you're good. I think you're good.
Okay, good evening once again, council members. Thank you for your time. I'm Christopher Hobbs, 1391 Reeser Creek. I'm speaking for myself, and I'd like to express my concern about the DEI chapter addition to the comprehensive plan. Number one, I'm still having a difficult time understanding why something of this nature would be included in a plan that particularly is meant to deal with growth management. And I also have some other concerns just about the language. I see it as very, very flowery and positive language. There's good aspects to it, things like making things more accessible and opening the access to the city to a wider group. Some of the issues I have with it are that it is essentially identity politics. It's a means of splitting people into categories. And I think a better way to address this kind of situation of getting unity in the community is to focus on what is the same about us all. How do we come together and find commonality rather than accentuating on differences? And I'm really concerned about this language being used with the DEI Commission, this idea of a diversity, inclusivity, diversity, equity, inclusivity lens. When I think of a lens, I think of a microscope or a telescope. And in all those cases, when you look through that lens, you're seeing a small portion of the picture. You're not seeing the whole picture. And I think that that's a good analogy for this DEI Commission and that has been proposing this and working on this. I noticed in the definition of diversity in this document, it makes a reference to that some of the differences are race, gender, religion, on it says political perspective. And I've noted that in the DEI Commission, there is really not a diversity of political perspective there. So this lens, I believe, has an inherent bias built into it. And I think that I know that there's been a concern of having a conversation about this. And I really think it needs to be opened up a lot wider than just the limited listening tours that have been held. And I know there have been some people that I'm aware of that have sent in written comments regarding the fact that systemic racism has really not been proven to exist in Ellensburg. Is there really a problem? And are we trying to solve something that does not exist? So I'd caution the council in continuing with this because I see it leading to a place where there might be some problems and perhaps there's another solution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Um, Does I don't think that's me. Anyone else wish to approach council? Does staff have anything to add?
I don't have anything to add. I just want to clarify that the future land use designation is just necessary to support future rezones. So I think you guys understand that.
Okay, council, do you have questions of staff or public? Seriously? I do.
Where do you begin?
If I, to staff, just a question, it's the 2104, which is, I believe the recommendation is that we move that to the docketing comprehensive plan process of 2022, which would incorporate the current data, but then also potentially change goals within the comprehensive plan. We've done a housing needs assessment. We've also endorsed or adopted a housing action plan. And we're also on the cusp of initiating our implementation of the housing action plan in 2021. So I want to make sure that this action does not impact our ability to implement whatever we're calling the housing, to implement the housing action plan and whatever strategies would come out of our implementation work.
No, that's a great question. I think that it would actually better serve us to wait on updating this chapter so that we can go through the exercises
Okay.
of the housing implementation. And one of the things that came out of the housing action plan, too many similar terms, was that we did need to update the goals and policies. And all we did was recognize that that was an action that needed to take place. And we want to do that in a thoughtful manner where we might have joint meetings between the Affordable Housing Commission and the Planning Commission and with feedback from the public.
Can I follow up on that? So on page 137, there's a list of actions the council can take on these, and saving it for next year is not on the list.
It's called referring it to,
Oh, refer all or part
yeah, that's what we did last
back to
year
the
with,
planning commission. Okay, so that
Or, no,
essentially
it would be
well,
D.
it's just referring it into the next
to
docket
the next
cycle.
year. Okay, D. Okay,
That's what we did with
Thank-
2002 and 03 last year.
thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Missed it.
Other questions?
I had a question about the 2110, but maybe we don't want to hold that until we get to that. We're going to hold that to the very end and discuss our options as.
Well, this would be the opportunity to ask the question, I think,
Okay.
as opposed to getting into discussion.
Yeah, okay. So it sounded like, if I understood the attorney's breakdown of this, the modification, if you will, is it correct that it would not be necessary to refer this back to the planning commission in order to move forward with a modified? Yes, that's correct. Okay. What, I guess my question would be, how does forwarding a modified proposal affect our SEPA, including improved SEPAs that we've had, if at all? Well, it went through SEPA for the full parcel being designated, which he now wants as a part of the parcel. So in essence, the SEPA has really been done, and it would not change I think you issued a DNS, and shrinking the size of what's being done would not substantively change the SEPA that went before. Would that also capture, I can't recall exactly, but the split in land use designations, which wasn't, if I remember correctly, that was not part of the original SEPA request, right? That's correct. So that has no bearing on the DNS or? Yeah, we looked at that and also discussed that with outside counsel, and the consensus was that it would not. Okay, okay. And then last question, I guess, the option that is not available to us is to remove one of the docketed items completely and refer it. I mean, we're doing another one, we're referring something specifically back to next year, one of the ones we just discussed. Would a similar option be available to us on this one if we wanted to go? Yes, it would be. Okay.
So on docket proposal 1, on the parks page, can you speak to why just in terms of the schedule for the projects, the field house, which just recently came to us, was scheduled for next year implementation, but the Reed Park improvements, which we have a plan underway for, was out in 2026, and the community center, which we have talked about for 10 years, was also scheduled out further. So it just in terms of scheduling those projects, I know that we don't have to hold to the schedule strictly, but it does kind of indicate what staff is thinking in terms of.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm hoping Heidi can speak to this just a bit, because she emailed me this new updated version right before the meeting. I had it ready, but I forgot to bring it up in the meeting because it wasn't in the staff report.
So the Parks and Recreation Commission had a discussion, and those priorities, those dates that the projects fell into may not have best represented the council priorities. And so moving a number of those projects into different years, and so moving the Reed Park project up into 2022, and also the the community center into 2023, and moving the field house discussion so we can have more discussion about priorities with that and options for that into 2024 would be staff's recommendation. And I think we put that on your dais as a potential amendment.
That's this one.
Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you, Heidi. And it's right here on the screen too.
Yeah,
but
I was getting real,
It's too much. I get it.
well, it was a little confusing because never mind. We're good. Other questions?
Just procedurally, I have a number of questions and concerns about the economic development chapter. So one of our options might be to refer part of it, accept part and not another part. Is that?
Yeah, and I know this question came up earlier today, and if you were to move forward with the IT proposal, you could move just that one forward, and it would take into account the changes to the capital facilities and utilities chapter, and then the items in the goals section of the economic development chapter. And then if you wanted to further explore the other one, so the IT one is docket item 2105.
Yep.
And then the centrifuge one is 2106. So that might be a way to look at it, Nancy.
So if we accept 05, we still get amendments to the economic development chapter goals,
Yeah,
but we don't get some of the narrative. Okay, thank you.
yes.
And by the same token, that would roll up the recommendations from the DEI Commission into that. Where is that language?
Their language is also solely within the goals and policy section.
So the 05, it was incorporated in
Yeah.
05. Okay.
Oh, okay, so, okay, I think I got it.
Other questions? Okay, then, let's give it a shot.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Public testimony portion of this hearing is now closed. Council may now begin its discussion deliberation of this matter. Again, note, since this is very complex and lengthy, that if we do have additional questions of staff or the public, we will reopen the public hearing to answer that question so that we can have that as testimony, and then we would close and consider continued discussion. With that, is anyone bold enough to move anything forward?
I will do so.
I had a feeling. I don't know what it was.
I may need some help with the wording here, but I would like to address 2110 and property owners proposal of a split land designation, the south portion commercial and the north portion remaining the neighborhood.
Councilmember Elliott, a little louder, please.
So if I'm hearing, we would move approval of 2110 with modifications presented tonight.
This evening.
That is my motion.
Is that a second? Do we have a second?
No, it's my motion.
I know it is. Rich seconded it. We have a motion and second, and then we're going to go back to 2101. We're going to go back sequentially. I appreciate the, but we do have a motion at this point, second on 2110 to accept, I guess it would be accept staff recommendation as presented this evening, which would incorporate a split of future land use for the designated parcel. Is there any further discussion on 2110?
I think it makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so I'm getting nods. Councilmember Lamb, do you have any comment?
Nodding. You just can't see it.
I can if you turn your camera on. That said, so that we do have a motion and second to adopt, how are we doing this? How do we,
Well, you can go through them one by one, but at some point you'll need a motion for first reading of the ordinance.
So we kind of know what we're doing with 10. Let's leave it alone. I would like to make a similar motion for 2111 and accept the split land designation proposal that staff and the landowner provided for the South UGA area.
You have two motions on the floor at the same time.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I
getting,
don't think you had a vote on.
yeah, so I guess that was the direction I was looking for. If we still, yeah, if I may, we need clarification, so we're not going to sit here and go. We've done it a couple different ways. My recollection is we have actually adopted each one by one at times, but I also recognize, but honestly, if we're going to have to make accept staff recommendations, it's going to be, it will be a challenge to
So,
frame the ordinance appropriately with appropriate language.
so my suggestion would be continue as you're doing through each one. The motion for first reading of the ordinance can incorporate the previous votes on how to accept adopted
Okay.
items.
Okay. So, thank you. So then we do have a motion. Let's do the motion second on 2110, which is to accept staff recommendation. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I too vote aye. That motion carries. Then we'll go to 2111, since I think there's general consensus on that also. Motion is to accept staff recommendation. I think,
Was it seconded?
no, we didn't get there. I don't think we got a second on that one. So we have a motion second to accept the staff recommendation for future land use designation for amendment 21-11 as on the designated parcel. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, who seconded that motion?
Councilmember Goodloe.
Thank you.
That's the quiet side of the dais, but that's the challenge right now. So we do have a motion second for 2111. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I too vote aye. That motion carries.
So I'll move to docket proposal 2101 and approve with changes to amend the park schedule as presented on our desk tonight.
Second.
So we have a motion second to accept docketed or proposal 2101 with the modified Parks and Rec capital improvement schedule as presented.
And just speaking to that, I think that it reflects what we have been talking about as a council better. And I realize that we can, well, just first, the Reed Park neighborhood has been waiting for 10 years for us to do something up there. the field house is a great project, but we have, we've been talking about the rec center or the community center for 10 years. And I don't understand how the field house and the rec center work together. And I think we need at least a year's worth of discussion on that. So I'm okay if we do the field house first, but I think just we need to reflect the commitment that the community has made talking about the community center too.
And I think if we do the field house first, that will change the whole community discussion around the community center.
Yeah, and I'd like to talk about that
Absolutely.
before we jump in.
Okay. Further comment? We have a motion and second to approve the proposal 2101 with the amended Parks and Rec capital improvement schedule and cost summary as presented this evening. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I too vote aye. That motion carries. Thank you. Then let's move down to 2102.
Well, I'll move 2102 as presented.
I'll second.
So a motion second to approve docketed proposal 2102. This is, well, actually, it's functionally the DEI chapter and language is incorporated in our packet.
I was waiting for Nancy to.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry, I lost, my papers are so unorganized. I didn't know for sure what.
Which, do you want 50 or 60 of mine?
No.
Okay, just checking. So we do have a motion and second to accept proposal 2102. Is there any further discussion?
I hear Mr. Hobbs. I have less concern. I think what may have started as just a land use, check the box for GMA kind of activity. I think that what this, the comp plan does is shape the community in a different way. There are things in and not in that chapter that I would quibble with maybe, but this is not the opportunity to rewrite it. But every year we do improve on things, and so we can have further discussions.
Any
I would
further
just,
comment?
I agree. I agree.
I
think that's
agree with
well
that.
said.
Also, I don't agree with the statement that it's a political kind of thing and it's associated with identity politics. It's associated with making this community a better community and a stronger community as we grow. So that as we come together 10 years from now with 10 or 12,000 more people living here, we're working together and we have a broader commitment from the community to make the community better because all people will be involved in the conversation. And that's the goal of the DEI Commission. We're not out to divide anybody. And hopefully as we roll out some of the things that we are talking about and the work that we want to do, the community will see that.
Thank you. We do have a motion and second. See, I just got myself lost now.
2102.
To adopt proposal 2102. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I too vote aye. That motion carries. Moves us to 2103. This proposal to update the housing chapter conform with requirements of House Bill 1220.
Move to approve as presented.
We have a motion and second to approve proposal 2103 as presented. Any further discussion? Other than to note that the language we're incorporating will be interesting if you recognizing that our joint meeting with the Board of County Commissioners on Thursday will speak to supportive housing, emergency housing, and homelessness. The language that is incorporated in this is probably an appropriate action. All that said, so we do have a motion to approve 2103 to update the housing chapter, confirm with requirements of the House Bill 1220. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I
Aye.
too vote aye, that motion carries. Sorry, Tristan. Moves us to docket proposal 2104.
So a motion to refer proposal 2104 to next year's annual amendment process.
Second.
We have a motion and second. We have a motion and second to refer proposal 2104 to next year's annual amendment process. Is there any further discussion?
I guess, hearing that this is actually facilitating moving forward, makes me feel more comfortable with this, but I think we're gonna have to commit to, this has to be on the agenda monthly or every couple months for us to get through this.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, I think, we're doing a study session to go through the land use. Many of the land use conversations that we'll have directly tied to affordable housing and the nature and makeup of the community. And I was assured with Kirsten's observation that actually the work we're doing now around implementation with the Housing Action Plan informs the comprehensive plan and allows us to continue that conversation and move forward. So I think we're headed in the right direction on this. Any other comment? Okay, so we do have a motion and second to refer proposal 2104 to next year's annual amendment process. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I too vote aye, that motion carries. That brings us to 2105.
Mayor, I move 2105, approval 2105.
Second.
We have a motion and second to, I just lost 2105. Here we go. To approve proposal 2105 is presented. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I too vote aye, that motion carries. That would bring us then to 2106. This is the request from Centrifuge to update the economic development chapter of the comprehensive plan.
Mr. Mayor, I move we disapprove proposal 2106.
I'll second for discussion.
We have a motion second to, is disapprove the appropriate word? Is it an E? Oh, it is.
Deny.
Disapprove.
No, disapprove is E. We're good. Thank you, Nancy. I should know better. So we do have a motion and second to disapprove docket or the proposal 2106 with regarding the economic development chapter of the comp plan.
So let me speak to, I appreciate the work that went into this. We do have a study, the TIP study going on that we, rather than disapprove it, we can move it to next year if that feels better for folks. But I, in particular, had heartburn on pages 236 and 237. I can walk you through my objections if you'd like, but just under infrastructure, it starts talking about labor and workforce being very important, more important than infrastructure, and then it goes through a list of all kinds of things that is important for economic development, and then it jumps into what we currently have, and according to this, all we got is 2 highways and an airport. And I think we have a lot more going for us than 2 highways and an airport. And And what we need, it goes to broadband and then jumps into housing, and it just doesn't, it doesn't,
You can just say it doesn't.
yeah,
Well,
it doesn't fly.
and I guess I'll vote against the motion because I think that there are elements in here that we can build on. I think that we can I think we can continue to incorporate the tip study. I don't see this as being any different than the previous one. I get it that it has gaps and it jumps around. I think we should handle it the same way, just push it back into 2022. It needs to be updated anyway.
Okay, well, we can either vote on the motion or I can withdraw and then I would propose moving it to 2022.
Your choice.
Okay, I'll withdraw.
In the
And-
second, is there a second? Who is?
I'll
are you-
agree to that, yes.
Okay, so we have withdrawn the motion to disapprove. It sounded as if we were ready to entertain a motion to refer
Yes.
this to next year's.
So I'll instead move to refer to referred item or proposal 2106 to next year's process.
Second.
We have a motion second to refer proposal 2106 to next year's annual amendment process. Is there any further discussion?
I would just add, I think this is a wise approach in that the proponent of this docket item is and will be participating in the TIP strategies study. And we'll have firsthand experience in how things change. So I think the timing actually is very good. So I will support this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think we also hoped that one of the things that came out of the TIP study was a sense of what the EBDA priorities that they need to have to help move us forward. So I think it's a good decision. Also.
Well, and yeah, and just getting that into the comp plan, those priorities would be
Absolutely.
good.
So I guess I'd just like to point out again, I think this is something we'll need to be actively involved in. And I will point out that just for council representation on this commission is a little bit difficult because it overlaps with parks and I have both. So it makes part-time to be the best you can do. And I think we need to pay attention to it. And again, it's one of those things where we'll need to actively engage throughout the year so that we end up with something that we can support at the end of the year.
Well, we'll revisit committee appointments
I'm not
in
asking
January.
about the rest. I'm just saying that it's structurally broken a little bit. That
Yeah.
we have to leave one to go to the other or miss the other.
But I would point out also that we are on a separate track. We are working with COG, council's represented on COG, working through the TIP studies or TIP strategy. So I think we've got some parameters there.
I apparently got a yellow card, so I'm going to use this.
Okay. So I appreciate, yeah, I think.
Yeah. We were not sure what to do if you get a red card. You know, it's just like, oh my God. No, I think this is, I just briefly, I'll speak to this. I think this is a good strategic move. It keeps it in front of us in terms of the process. I think though, part of what occurred to me as I read through kind of the structure and the presentation is that we may want to have a conversation when there is a chapter of such substantive change that we I think as council somehow need to have that review before it comes in front of us for a first reading, second reading. This was one, overwhelming, secondly, structurally strange, third, not necessarily aligned with the priorities that we've talked about with council. But we also do not want to do committee work, you know, to the point where you're trying to break a chapter down and get council action. So I think maybe just, I don't know how we anticipate that, but this would have been a lot to try and digest if we were to move on this positively for incorporation in the plan this evening. So I think this is a really good, a good mechanism for both keeping this information in front of us but also recognizing that there's a parallel action taking place that impacts. what
Plus,
we're
we have a
doing.
council member elect who put this in his campaign, so.
So, yeah, that's good.
So we know who to.
Okay, then. So we do have a motion and second, I believe, for 2106 to simply refer that to next year's annual amendment process. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I too vote aye. That motion carries. Thank you. I think we've already done 2010 and 11. So then that would move us back to
Adopting an ordinance.
adopting an ordinance.
Mayor, move first reading of ordinance, what's our number?
4882.
4882, with the aforementioned 2021 comp fund amendments 2101, 2102, 2103, 2105, 2110, and 2111 as modified, and 2104 and 2106 referred back to 2022's process.
Second.
Yeah, that was good.
Very good.
So we have a motion second to conduct first reading of ordinance 4822.
4882.
4882, thank you. As moved, I'm not going to go through that. Is there any further discussion?
I just say thank you to staff and for fellow council members who have taken the time to pour through this. It is a heavy lift.
It's good. Yes, it is. Thank you. So we do have a motion second to conduct first reading. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I too vote aye. That motion carries.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Ellensburg, Washington, amending the comprehensive plan adopted by ordinance number 4785 and set out in chapter 15.120 of the Ellensburg City Code.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so now we're at page 270. Are we good? Do you want to keep pushing? How are we doing? Okay, let's go. We're on, this is 9A now, ordinance 4881. It's the mid-biennial review supplemental budget ordinance. We're on page 270.
Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor, Jerica Pasco, Finance Director. Before you, beginning on page 280, ordinance 4881 adopts amendments to the 2021-2022 biennial budget to reflect changes in operational requirements and adjustments to capital project plans approved through prior council action, along with other modifications to the biennial budget as proposed by the city manager. Council held a public hearing and gave first reading of ordinance at the November 15th, 2021 regular meeting. However, several changes are incorporated for second reading. In the general fund, additional expenditure authority is added to fund contractual payments for downtown cleanup and planter maintenance and election costs associated by, allocated by the county to local governments. The sidewalk fund includes an additional transfer in to accommodate complete streets grant funded sidewalk improvements. And the 2010 debt service fund and water and sewer funds include additional expenditure authority for updated debt service costs for 2021 bond issues and refunding. The proposed ordinance amends the biennial budget, increasing budgeted 2021 expenditures by $2,565,677 and revenue by $2,287,548 and increasing the budgeted 2022 expenditures by $2,192,494 and revenue by $16,628. The effects of these amendments on the budgeted 2022 ending fund balance is a decrease of $2,453,995. Staff recommends council give second reading and adoption of ordinance 4881, amending the 2021-2022 biennial budget.
Great, thank you. Council.
I move second reading adoption of ordinance 4881, which is the 2021-2022 biennial budget.
Second.
A motion second to conduct second reading and adoption of ordinance 4881, the biennial review supplemental budget ordinance. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, if the clerk would call the roll.
Elliott,
Yes.
Goodlow,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Lilquist,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye.
Cab.
Yes. That motion carries.
An ordinance amending the 2021-2022 biennial budget of the city of Ellensburg as set forth in ordinance number 4864 and previously amended as set forth in ordinance number 4875 to adjust appropriations in the city's funds.
Great, thank you. That brings us to page 284 in our packet. We're at 9B. This is a pay plan resolution for 2022.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. For the record, Lisa Young, HR Director. You have before you a resolution submitted to council for consideration to adopt the compensation rates for non-represented employees for fiscal year 2022. The ranges for non-represented employees are adjusted upward 3% in this plan, as previously approved by council in May of 2021. This resolution also includes a new temporary position, construction project manager, assigned to the Public Works Division and expected to perform work for the next 2 to 3 years. This position is budgeted with Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds as designated by council. The increase is estimated to cost $160,885 in 2022. 94,870 of that are additional costs to the general fund. Council adopted the necessary budget adjustments in the last supplemental budget ordinance, and the recommendation is for the council to consider and approve the resolution.
Great, thank you. Council.
Motion to approve the resolution and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement with, whoops, I'm on the wrong. I got lost, sorry.
Okay.
Somebody else got it.
It's the resolution number.
2021.
36.
Mayor, move resolution 2136, the 2022 pay plan resolution.
Second.
So a motion second to approve resolution 2021-36, establishing a pay plan for fiscal year 2022. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I too vote aye. That motion carries. Thank you for hanging out. Sort of. That moves us to 8C then. This is a resolution approving mental or multifamily housing. It's a limited property tax exemption agreement.
We have Jamie.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. This is Jamie Ailing with Community Development Department. And as stated, what you have before you is the resolution to approve the multifamily housing limited property tax exemption agreement with Stalder Holdings LLC. Stalder Holdings submitted an application with Community Development Department to receive the multifamily housing tax exemption for his development known as First and Pine Studios. The project's located at 101 North Pine Street and will contain 19 studio units and is currently under construction. If approved, this multifamily tax exemption will allow for the value of the new housing construction to be exempt from ad valorem property taxation for a period of 8 successive years, beginning January 1st of the year immediately following the calendar year of issuance of the certificate. The eligibility requirements and procedures for approving the MFTE project can be found in Ellensburg City Code, Chapter 2.30. Staff has found that this project does meet the eligibility requirements of the code, and the next step is to enter into a contract with the city. If council approves this contract, we will issue the conditional certificate of tax exemption, which will contain a statement that the property is complied with City Code 2.30, 0.050, and 0.060. And the conditional certificate expires 3 years from the date of approval, basically allowing them 3 years to complete the construction and apply for the final certificate. What this means financially for the city is if the exemption will delay the increase in property tax associated with this development collected by the county and given to the city over an 8-year period, beginning in, if it's done by 22, the year it's completed and approved, for 8 consecutive years with a $1.3 million value of those improvements. It would basically mean $2,270 each year for those next 8 years. And with that, staff would recommend that council approve the resolution and authorize city manager to sign the agreement with Stalder Holdings LLC.
So moved.
Second.
So we have motion second to approve resolution 2021-37, approving the multifamily housing limited property tax exemption agreement with Stalder Holdings LLC for Person Pine Studios. Is there any further discussion? Matthew, did you want to speak just because you've been sitting here for an hour and 45 minutes? You don't have to at all. We do have a motion and second to approve the resolution 2021-37. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I too vote aye. That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings, thank you, Jamie. That brings us to 9D. This is a resolution to approve affordable housing agreement with Habitat for Humanity. We're on page 301 in our packets.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council Terry Weiner, City Attorney. As council's aware, back in November of 2017, the voters within the city approved a 0.1% increase in sales and use tax for housing and related services consistent with the RCW, allowing for such tax. And in addition to that, the city has taken some action in the past few years to increase our supply of surplus property that can also be put forward to use as affordable housing under a separate section of the RCW. As part of this, in October of 2020, the city received an application from Habitat for Humanity, Seattle King County, which operates the local Habitat office here, requesting the acquisition of the city's surplus property, which is located at the intersection of Bender and Water Streets, for use as affordable housing, along with a request for $765,000 in the affordable housing sales tax fund. And that proposal was made for the construction of 18 single-family dwellings, providing home ownership opportunities to low-income families consistent with Habitat for Humanity's program. That came before City Council for consideration about a year ago in December of 2020. And the award letter that was approved and the award letter was issued at that time. Since then, this is sort of tonight, the culmination of the negotiation process. It's been a lengthy process, obviously. We've worked closely with Habitat for Humanity and their outside counsel, and we also utilized outside counsel for the services. This is a complicated agreement. I recognize that because there are a lot of moving parts considering the model for Habitat for Humanity ownership, as well as dealing with some of the land use issues themselves. I know this is a long packet, but what I didn't include was another 90+ pages of attachments to the agreement, which were provided via link to those documents. If approved under the agreement, the homeowner affordability provisions would be in place for at least 50 years. It would include 3 of the homes, the ones that are being partially funded by the city's contribution, would be under the 60% AMI requirement, at least 3. And the remainder would be come under the 80% AMI requirements for the use of surplus property as affordable housing. At this time, during the negotiations, Habitat's been very active in pursuing their permit process. Most of the permit documents have been completed. You approved the preliminary plat application earlier this year. We anticipate a final plat application will be received in the next month or 2, and that shortly after that, Habitat will begin construction. They'll have to make obviously road improvements to the north-south corridor there, and other frontage improvements, followed by phased development of the property. I think the final completion date is 2025, in summer of 2025. So this is going to be a big project for them and a big project for the city in terms of, I think we've had a few Habitat homes built in the past in and around Ellensburg, but certainly this is the largest project of its kind that's been considered. I think with us tonight, we have representative from Habitat. I also have Alice Ostick, who was the city's outside counsel. So if there are any questions, we can certainly entertain those for them. But I haven't gone through any of the details of the agreement, but we can certainly do so. And I'm happy to answer any questions or allow other folks who have more knowledge of the details to do so.
Great, thank you. Council,
Mr. Mayor, move resolution 2138, approving the affordable housing agreement with Habitat for Humanity.
we have a motion second to approve resolution 2021-38, the affordable housing agreement with Habitat for Humanity. Is there any further discussion? Again, I think we really, it's always remarkable to me that we can pass something in like 45 seconds that has taken us however long. I mean, this has been an incredible lift, I think, for Terry. I don't know our outside attorney, but I know that they worked closely with you. I appreciate and would note that Patrick Sullivan, who's the director of construction is with us virtually. And I know Patrick has worked hard to get us to this point, as did their counsel. And I think that needs to be recognized. I also want to recognize the city manager's ability, because there were barriers, and there needed to be consistent, clear communication to move this forward to the point where we could actually see construction by spring. And this is truly, for those of us that have been involved with the affordable housing piece here, this is huge. So again, I want to recognize all of the work that went on behind the scenes to get us to the point where we can make a quick motion and pass a resolution to move to the next step. So thank you all.
I appreciate 50 years.
Yeah, 50 years is good.
Years is good.
But it's also what the Housing Trust Fund requires. So
Still good.
which is part of their capital
Still good.
stack, but putting that aside,
Yeah.
it is good. Okay, we do have a motion and second on the floor for the resolution. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I too vote aye, that motion carries. We have no unfinished business. This is going to move us then to 11A. We're on page 351. This is the Clean Energy Transformation Act Implementation Plan. So were you just hanging out upstairs then and waiting for this moment?
Yes, waiting with excitement.
This is not a good way to start.
Okay, good
Everybody,
evening.
hang on one second. We want to make sure we get that on the Zoom feed. Drew's going to help you out here.
And I felt like he was going to escort you out of the building to the bomb threat.
Okay, good evening, Mayor, Council, Buddy Stanovich, Power and Gas Manager. Before you this evening is the Clean Energy Implementation Plan as required by the Clean Energy Transformation Act, otherwise known as CETA. So the main objectives of CETA is to eliminate coal in our resource portfolio by the year 2025. Requires a greenhouse gas neutral energy standard by the year 2030 and 100% renewable or non-emitting power by the year 2045. As you can see, we are already meeting the objectives out to 2030, but there's much more to this act. So just a high level overview of the Clean Energy Transformation Act. It was signed into law back in 2019. It applies to all retail electric utilities in the state of Washington. And it requires the equitable distribution of energy benefits and the reduction of burdens to vulnerable and highly impacted communities. It ensures long and short-term public health, economic, and environmental benefits. It aims to reduce the costs and risks associated with electricity, and it maintains energy security and resiliency. So an overview of what renewable energy looks like in the state. Majority is made up of hydro, followed by wind there. You can't see it on this screen, but the city's fuel mix is over 94% carbon free. And again, the majority of that is made up with hydro, followed by nuclear. And this is just a comparison of how we stack against the other utilities in the Northwest and then on the national basis. So CETA is filled with milestones. Here's a few that are upcoming. The plan before you this evening, the Clean Energy Implementation Plan, is due by the end of the year. We've got an energy assistance report that's due in February, and then a fuel mix report due the middle of next year. Both are much smaller than the plan that you have before you. So the Clean Energy Implementation Plan, it's specific actions taken in the near term to ensure the equitable transition. It aims to identify those vulnerable populations and the highly impacted communities. It creates energy efficiency and demand response targets, and then also sets a standard for the resource adequacy to be used. So this plan was introduced at the October Utility Advisory Committee. Feedback was taken and it was brought back to the November UAC meeting, where the committee forwarded a recommendation to City Council to adopt the plan. I'm available for any questions that you may have.
So I guess I just want to make the point that the plan checks the boxes for us because it's required, but it's not necessarily a useful planning tool for the city, especially with regard to some of those vulnerable population statistics that have 90% confidence intervals. So, I mean, it is something we need to do, and it helps us meet the requirements of state law. But one thing that occurred to me as I was reading it on page 365, it talks about the long-term plans, and it kind of goes through some of the projections and things that might affect the kind of energy that we need in the future. And I would like to add a discussion of the Climate Commitment Act and the transition of gas to electric for heat. I think that's going to have a huge impact on our electricity demand, and that's not reflected in this document. But as I read what they want you to respond to, I'm not sure that it's appropriate here. So if we could weave that in somewhere, just to let them know that what the state is doing on one hand with gas really affects what we do with electricity.
You're absolutely correct. And CETA was developed before the CCA. and the rules were developed as well before that. But I do agree that it should be included, and it most likely will be included by us, but then by all the other electric utilities in the state the next go around, which is in 4 years from now. But we can definitely add it to our plan.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, because the overall challenge for us is, I mean, reading through some of the responses is interesting. Please explain the importance of resiliency. Well, we got to keep the power on. Okay. That's helpful. But I mean, ultimately, what I think we have talked about is revisiting basically that overarching plan. I mean, we had an energy efficiency plan. I think that's what it was called.
Strategy.
Yeah, and I think the conversation, which this becomes somehow rolled up in, as well as the CCA, which is incredibly dense, where I am, or both, is ultimately to have something crafted that reflects where we're going as a community, and something that's trackable and implementable. I mean, one of the positives I did think of the energy efficiency plan that we had was that there were milestones in there that were and we could go back on how that was presented and what information we as council got. But the overall impact was we had something that we were working from that reflected the council's direction, UAC's input, and ultimately the community. And I think that's what ultimately we need, not that, because this is a lot of work, but I mean, this is a requirement that you plug back in, it looks like to me, to the WAC or the RCW, as opposed to a community conversation of, which has already been initiated, I think we should note, that has something come back to council ultimately to say, okay, these are our priorities in terms of where we're going to move and the impact it has on our own utility, and here's how we're going to begin to do that. Right. Okay. So any other comments? I would say, given the length of the plan, I probably appreciate the brevity of the presentation. But
I appreciate the maps.
yeah, well, anyway, but there's good information here, and I appreciate that. So, council, do we need to move on approval?
There's a resolution to be approved.
Oh, there is.
Mayor, move resolution 2139 approving the Clean Energy Transformation Act implementation plan.
Second. I'm sorry, I misspoke.
I move approval, no resolution.
Yeah, because thank you.
I just got hung up on resolutions tonight.
That's good. We're on a roll. I
I
mean,
was hitting for the cycle. That would have been my fourth one.
Thanks, shot.
so you go from a yellow card to a hat trick.
Hitting for the cycle.
Okay, we do have a motion and second on the floor to approve the Clean Energy Implementation Plan. Is there any further discussion?
Yes.
Who seconded that?
You seconded?
Kristen?
Okay.
I did, maybe.
Oh.
No, yeah, it wasn't me.
It was Councilmember Miller.
It was a resolution
Thank
back
you.
then.
Do I need to make a motion to amend to include that CCC language, or can we just do
Well,
that before we pass it on?
Are you wanting to include that in the plan, or just as part of the process moving forward?
Well, I would,
I don't know
On-
that.
I don't
I'd
think
have
we
to
can
defer to
insert
Buddy
it
as to
'cause
whether
due
that
in
can be
January.
included in the plan that's submitted, since it's dictated by the WAC.
right, but on page 366, it looks to me like a space where it could be included as a paragraph.
But the way I understand it, it's due in January. So
It's just a,
No,
it would just be a paragraph acknowledging that the state law requirements under CCA is going to impact our electric utility demand in the future.
Okay.
So yes, I
So
would
that's a
suggest you amend it then.
That's got to be an amendment. I mean, that's significant enough. So
So I would move to amend the language on page 366 to include a discussion, brief discussion about the impact of the Climate Commitment Act on electric demand for the city.
Second.
So a motion second to amend the plan to incorporate language that reflects the impact of the CCA on electric demand in the city. We have further discussion on the amendment. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I too vote aye. That motion carries. Do we need
Now we need to vote on the main motion.
or the amended motion? Well, it's,
Amended motion.
yeah, so we now, we have a motion. I'm confused.
You have a motion to adopt the plan as.
As amended.
As
Well,
amended.
we don't have that. Technically, the motion was to adopt the plan.
Right.
But no, the motion, we started with the Sam.
Yeah, I think Councilmember Lillick was treating her original motion as withdrawn and moved
Entertain a
first to
second
amend
motion.
the plan, and now you need a new motion to adopt the
So
amendment. plan.
you've withdrawn, I don't know.
Councilmember Elliott made the motion to approve the plan and
Well,
Lilquist.
Yeah, he was on a resolution roll.
Did you amend the main motion on the
I didn't
table?
hear a second for that, though.
I did. I seconded it.
Yes. I have that it was made by Councilmember Elliott and seconded by Councilmember Miller.
That was the original. That was the original motion.
And she amended.
That's
it, and I
correct.
So we can, okay, so we can vote, yes, so we have a motion and second to approve the CETA plan as amended. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I too vote aye. That motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, buddy. That was, okay, we have now amazingly landed on page 443. This is 11B, appointment process for council position number 7.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Heidi Barron-Sternaway, City Manager. Councilmember Lamb, the current elected for position number 7 for council, announced her resignation effective the end of the year. And so you have before you a sample announcement and application and recommendation, or at least a starting place for potential for announcing the opportunity for candidates to be appointed to position number 7 in council. So the current schedule that's proposed in the materials is that the position would be posted with a very simple application this week. It could be open through the 27th of December, and we would have applications ready for interview and approval at the January 3rd meeting for City Council. That timeline can certainly be extended. I know there may be some concerns about people paying attention during the holidays. This is just a starting place for staff. And we can talk, again, this is a process that we've used in the past for our last appointment and previous appointments, but the process could be amended as well. So looking for staff recommendation on posting for the position.
Great, thank you, council.
Mayor,
Yeah.
so I think the process is sound. It's what we've done. It seems to work well. The only thing I would suggest is that maybe we consider the closing date still being sometime in the first week of January or so to give people an opportunity to come back from the holidays. But also build in a contingency that if we get, an excessive number of applications, that we're probably going to want to manage this process outside of a regular council meeting. If that's not the case, then we can schedule it for the 18th. That is the correct one, right? The 18th would be the one after MLK. So that would be my only suggestion, and I don't have a hard.
You're not gonna fall over.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to point out just a typographical error on the advertisement, whether we change the date or not, that it is showing as 2023. It should be 2022, I believe.
That's correct.
Council, other thoughts? I mean, I would, go ahead, David.
No, I was just, as far as the the interview date. I know the first meeting of the year is busy with new council election. I don't know what we have on the agenda for that meeting otherwise, so I was thinking along the lines of whether or not we wanted to do the interviews on the second meeting of January for that reason, but I too am open to.
Well, no, go ahead. I mean, I'm thinking this, I'm watching Nancy G's over here. I mean, I feel like, and Tristan, you can jump in here. Though,
You're a lame duck.
yeah, I wasn't, she said it. But I mean, I think I would tend to agree. I mean, when we first discussed the timeline, it seemed to me that it could be a challenge over the holidays to get people's attention. You know, and that really there's not necessarily any critical reason to say we've got to appoint simply because there's a vacancy on January 3rd. And I think if we left it open a bit past the 3rd, we would have some sense on the January 3rd meeting of the volume of applications received and to see if we then need just perhaps structure a different process.
I would agree.
Okay, so when would we close it then?
So my recommendation would be possibly the 6th or the 7th of January, so that Thursday or Friday, and then we could make some adjustments in our schedule.
Yeah,
prior to
I would
that
say
meeting.
that, I'd say the 7th, might as well, and, you know, go to the end of business on the end of the week. Okay, good, thank you. Thank you for putting that together, and council, thanks for that input. I think that's a good way to go. Okay, then, we're actually at, I will note that we're doing an executive session. But we are and have made it to city manager's report.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor. Just a few things on the city manager's report. A reminder that our inaugural, or I guess our very first joint city-county study session is scheduled for December 9th. I believe the meeting announcement went out today. And that's at 5:30 p.m. in the council chambers here. The meeting will be held hybrid fashion, so folks can join us here and also remotely. And we'll have all that information on the city's website, and the county is posting a notice as well.
If I may, though, just so people that are either paying attention or streaming, it is a joint session of the commission and council. We will not be taking public input. But simply, it's an opportunity for us to have a conversation with the county commissioners.
Absolutely.
Is that meeting, there's no advertised end time for that? Is it just an open-ended time frame, or do we have to, or would it be?
We don't have to end at a particular time. I think the hope is that we won't go much past an hour.
Yeah.
Okay.
And second, we were very excited initially about the city working with Habitat for Humanity to apply for a CHIP grant. It's really connecting housing to infrastructure. Our staff, I'm not quite as excited as I sit before you today. Our staff attended the rollout of the commerce, and they did not mention in any of their materials that it's required to be in a specific census tract. And so we're going to see if we can push past that. And so I'll keep you posted on that, but that would require some council support. It's an amazing grant program, and it'd be great. Potentially a wonderful match for that Habitat project that you approved tonight. And then finally, my request is to continue study sessions through the last half of the last 2021 here. We've been hosting study sessions for an hour at the second meeting of council, so the third Monday of the month. And I just based on the discussion we had tonight, I know that there are a lot of things that are coming for us and still on our list of things to do. So it's been a really helpful for staff to have that opportunity and for council to have this discussion. So my recommendation would be to continue doing study sessions starting at 6 p.m. On that third Monday of the month into 2022.
Good. I would also note that it allows the scheduling, but we don't, if there is not an apparent reason, we don't need to do it.
I have a question on the census tracts you referred to, and is that the same census tracts that we followed with the CETA?
That's correct.
That designates low income, marginalized areas.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Thank you.
So do we need a motion for
For,
study sessions to extend? I think we had them extended through the regular meetings, extended through the end of 2021 only.
You want a motion? Okay, Mr. Mayor, I'd move that council approve scheduling of study sessions on the third Mondays of the month through the year 2022.
Second.
a motion second to extend the study sessions to this second council meeting of the month through 2022. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I too vote aye, that motion carries. And the only reason is January is a great example. We'll be in Tuesday.
Oh, right, yes. And
So.
6 p.m. is a good time, but
Okay.
flexibility is good too.
Okay, then let's go to council reports. And again, we're going to do an exec. So I'll start with Rich.
So just real quick, there's a public hearing tomorrow with county commissioners on the 0.1%, potentially could result in a vote. Into the EMS council meeting last Thursday. Just FYI, we're encountering in emergency medical services, as is the hospital, some fairly significant staffing shortages, which complicate and sort of intermix with the COVID impacts on the healthcare system. The reason I missed half of last meeting was I was down in Reno meeting with people on the infrastructure bill and on a significant sort of seismic change in how we're approaching wildland fire. That's not a significant issue per se for the city of Ellensburg, and that we're not really directly at risk, but we are impacted by smoke and the economic impacts, air quality, those type of things. And they're investing hundreds of billions of dollars in basically 1/3 of the National Cohesive Strategy, which is landscape resiliency, which means basically land management, active land management. And all of those things will be happening in the land around us. And so we should stay active. And I would note that from an economic development perspective, one of the reasons that fuels mitigation work is so difficult in Washington State, in addition to the resistance to prescribed fire when that's appropriate, is the fact that we can't process biomass, and Ellensburg is very well situated to process biomass that comes off the land. This is a conversation we've had on and off over the last 15 or 20 years, and we need to be able to have it has to be financially viable to process that biomass. Otherwise, this work will continue to just be the government, and that's not sustainable. So we should be looking at that as a potential economic development strategy, a chipping plant or something where we can process that biomass.
So Rich, just,
That's part of the infrastructure deal too, is to fund industry.
and I've had those conversations, and part of it is securing long-term contracts for the logs.
And it's not just logs, it's biomass.
Biomass, but
But-
it's changing the way the Forest Service and
Yeah.
DNR do business.
Well, and it isn't just the Forest Service, it's BLM and
Yeah.
DNR, and all of those land management agencies have been given very clear direction to begin to change that so that we can get 40 and 50-year contracts. We have to do this.
Okay. That's good.
And all of my committees meet over the next week, so I'll have a report sometime.
Nancy.
I've had a couple of meetings since our last meeting. Met with Law and Justice Committee and with the UAC Committee. We always have a great discussion.
That's nicely said. Nancy.
I also attended UAC and the Environmental Commission. I've asked they're also the Bicycle Advisory Committee, so I've asked if there's any interest in promoting Bike Month next May. If anyone is out there that wants to help with that, I'm not sure. No one committed to anything. I attended a recreation forum meeting, which the Calista Cascades Coalition has recommended and is lobbying for the Kittitas Depot to be a capital request in the state parks budget to turn that into a museum and have, bathrooms and stuff, a pit stop along the way on the trail for people utilizing that trail. And they're also promoting winter essentials, safety kinds of promoting or, messaging, what to carry in your car and what, layer when you go out in the woods, kind of stuff that is good information. So.
That's good.
Attended the COG meeting last week, and it was a kickoff meeting for the TIP strategies stakeholder group. So it was pretty well attended, I think virtually. It was a virtual meeting. I don't know what our total participant count is, but it's substantial. So I think it's going to be an interesting year going through that process in the next several months in particular. And I missed the county's homeless affordable housing meeting last week. That a conflict. And then I was also doing some webinars on freight mobility and parking strategies, which don't necessarily have anything to do with Ellensburg, but interesting nonetheless.
Good, thank you. Yeah, nothing. I actually was able to have the opportunity to participate in the TIP kickoff also. That will be, we'll have an update at the joint meeting. I think simply to have knowledge of who's on the steering committee and those initial steps that were taken and some of the information that was garnered in that first meeting. I think it's a good group of folks that seem to be pretty motivated to participate and push this through. Also did affordable housing. We had updates on our projects. I think we're good. We're going to do an executive session.
We actually have two. The second one is related to.
So do I have to read this twice?
No, that covers.
That's what I was going to do. Just read this once. Is that okay?
Mayor Tab,
Yes.
I just want to give my update. I don't
Okay.
have an update, but I will still be out during our joint BOCC City Council meeting, and I will be doing my best to join virtually on Thursday.
Okay, thank you. How long?
10 minutes
Yes.
to start.
Yeah, let's go. So we're going to do an executive session. This is we're going into executive session to discuss litigation, legal risks of proposed action or current practice that the agency has identified when public discussion of litigation or legal risk is likely to result in an adverse legal or financial consequence to the agency. We'll go into a session for 10 minutes. There will be 2 items that we'll discuss.
No action.
No action will be taken when we come out of it because we're all going to want to go home. It's the wrong way. Excuse me, sir. It's kind of deep water for a while. We just snuck through that, right? We got through it. And I think we did good.
Yeah, the tail end was better than the picture. We got some momentum going. I think it was.
Okay, I've got that stuff too. Yes, I'll just.
Motion to adjourn.
We're good. Everybody, thank you.